He was drunker than usual. Ordinarily, she would feel relief when he collapsed onto the couch by the TV. That meant he was too drunk to yell and fight. Tonight, she felt no relief. All she could do was watch him from the doorway, hoping he would drink the whiskey she had just poured for him. A lump sat in her throat as she watched his fat belly rise and fall with his labored breath. In his hand, he held the last drink she would ever pour for him. He sat there for a few minutes in silence without even looking at the glass he clutched in his fat fingers. Then, without warning, he downed the entire glass in one movement. He didn't seem to notice the poison. He let the glass hit the ground and sighed. He would go to sleep soon. It wouldn't be painful, nowhere near as painful as the last 23 years he had been for her. She wanted him to leave the world peacefully. She still loved him, after all. She debated whether or not she should say anything to him. On one hand, she felt that she owed him nothing more than the death she had just given him. In fact, part of her wanted to celebrate with laughter and cheers, to make him feel real pain that the poison couldn't, the pain that she had felt for years now. On the other, she didn't really want him to suffer. In the end, she felt he deserved an explanation, and at the very least, he deserved a goodbye. She walked round to the front of the couch. He rolled his half-opened eyes in her direction, and the two stared at each other in silence. "That whiskey," she began, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry." "Your black eye is healing," he said quietly. "You know I'm sorry about hurting you, don't you?" She nodded. "You were very beautiful once. I can still see it sometimes, when you smile. You don't smile much these days. But when you do, your eyes flash like they did when we were teenagers. It reminds me of how young we once were. Young, beautiful, carefree. I took that from you. I took everything from you." "Your drink," she said with tears forming in her eyes. "You're dying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know," he whispered, and slowly nodded. "I saw you pour it in." She put her hands over her mouth and tried not to cry. "Do you remember that field trip we took during our second year of high school?" he asked. She shook her head. "We spent the whole day together," he said as his voice became fainter. "It was the first time I really met you. There were 50 or 60 of us there, but I really only noticed you. On the bus ride home, we sat next to each other. You remember now?" She nodded. "Everybody on the bus slept. They were so tired, but not us. We couldn't stop talking to each other. We had so much to say back then." His eyes began to glance up, as if searching for something. The right words, the right emotion, the right facial expression. He had been searching for those correct answers for years, but they always seemed to evade him. In fact, he hadn't spoken to her like this, truly spoken to her, in years. He refocused just as his eyes began to force themselves closed. "When you started to drift asleep, I was so disappointed. But then you said something to me. You remember what it was?" I, she paused to steady her voice. "I'm going to lean on you, okay?" "Yeah," he said, as a smile slowly spread across his face. "You fell asleep on my shoulder. I couldn't sleep the whole bus ride, but I was so happy that we were having that moment. And I know you didn't sleep either. The bus bounced too much. And back then my arms were muscular. You just wanted to be close to me. It probably was such a lousy pillow. And I'm sorry I was a worse husband. I hope that you're able to find someone that you can lean on and be truly safe, be at peace, be happy." She wanted to say something, but could not. His voice slowed even further. He spoke as if it was a dream. "I still love you as much as I did on that bus ride. I got worse at showing it. I'm sorry." She did not reply. She just stood and tried to compose herself. After a moment, she walked over and sat next to him on the couch. "I'm going to lean on you, okay?" she whispered. "Okay," he replied, as she rested her head against his arm. The two sat in silence until his breathing stopped at last. For the first time in a long time, maybe even since the bus ride, She was laying next to her husband, and she was truly safe. She was at peace, and for a moment she was happy.